I have control over what I say. And if I let them upset me, then I'm just playing into their bad behavior. So that's something I've had to learn, and it's hard. It's very hard sometimes because I want to take up for people, especially if somebody's saying something about someone I work with. Like the gossip thing, I don't like that. If you've got something to say, come and talk to me in person. Or don't tell me because I'm that boss, like you should fire this person. Like I started a job and people started coming in and saying, you should fire this person. I was like, was there any evidence that this person has not been performing well? What kind of, yearly evaluation scores do they have? I'm not going to just fire a person without data. It's just interesting how people try to play.
Hey listeners, have you ever sat through a training, a workshop, or even a leadership program that sounded good on paper and you were excited, but it didn't actually change how people showed up afterwards? Today's conversation is all about that. It's about why that gap exists and what truly works when it comes to learning, leadership, and human development, especially in a world that's evolving about those things even faster than ever. Today's guest brings a rare blend of academic depth, global experience, and real-world application. Kim Dooley is a professor. She's a researcher, global speaker, and the CEO of the Tech Training Group. She has spent decades studying how adults learn, how leaders grow, and how organizations can build training and development that actually sticks. She's authored 200 plus publications. She's trained leaders across 42 countries, and she continues to bridge the gap between research and practice, helping people not just learn more, but do better. Kim, that's a lot. I'm so glad to dive in, and I'm so happy you're here. You're welcome.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here and look forward to our conversation today.
Me too. So always, you can't get here without that origin story, like that burning question, right? You've worked in academia, consulting, global training, leadership development. What was it that originally drew you to this work of helping people learn and grow?
Well, it depends on how far you want me to go back. But
We
I
have
really
time.
think about this a lot, especially the global piece, because I grew up in Orange, Texas, which is right on the Louisiana border. So
Mhm.
we basically had gumbo cook-offs instead of chili cook-offs that you typically would have in Texas.
Yeah.
And, I'd never really traveled. Our family didn't have the means. We would camp and we would boat and things like that. But so when I was senior in high school, I was in an all-state choir that was asked to perform at Maple Leaf Stadium. So first time on a plane, I went to Toronto. And so, you're young and you think, wow, this is so great. I want to do more of this.
Yeah.
Well, as I continued through, my college years and was a high school teacher, went on to work in higher ed, I found my place really when people started asking about distance education and how we could start to train people all over the world using the technology or even within our Texas A&M University system. So I ended up doing a lot of training initially that was more about technology for teaching.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot because back during that time period, it was still interactive video conferencing.
Yeah.
And so now it's more ubiquitous. We can sit at our computers at home and have these kind of conversations. So it really was, once I started working in that area, one of the first things I did is I went to Costa Rica and I was there for a month with my family.
Wow.
And we were all trying to learn Spanish. I said, try. I know a lot of vocabulary, but it was never very good at conjugation. But we lived there for a month. And I think my youngest daughter was maybe 5 or 6 at the time. And I worked with the Inter-American Agency for Agriculture on how to connect all of the member countries. And so that was really my first, oh, wow, I could do international work within my professoria position. So it just, I don't know, that's where it started. And now I've been all over the place.
You
And
have a month in Costa Rica. So was there a specific moment, Kim, early on when you realized how broken or ineffective traditional training models could be or how much they could improve?
well, I think it's good to give a little backstory here because one of the things we also do at the tech training group is that we do evaluation. And over the years of doing evaluation on projects, you know, even if you know all the best evaluation theories and techniques and great data collection with research, a lot of times evaluations go on a shelf. And so a few years ago, several of my colleagues and I started talking about more of a sustainable evaluation approach. And so, one of the things I think that was really a turning point in working in international settings was understanding beyond the evaluation the actual cultural aspects, understanding cultural mores, understanding customs. And so our evaluation model added a values section to make sure wherever we're working that we're including co-creation with local leaders. And so we would go into villages and we would do more what are called participatory approaches, more of a workshop, hands-on, getting to experiment if you're talking about a new technology or something along those lines. So
Mhm.
it was so interesting because my assumptions sometimes were off. And so
Sure.
I learned a lot about how important that is. And so the eval model added value. Then we decided that it's important that there's also active learning. And I think that's the way I learn best. I learn by doing. And so we added active learning components
Mhm.
with the clients. And then the last part was leadership development. And so that way, local leaders would have the skills to continue after the project was over or after the team leaves. And so, it just kind of evolved from experience that the best way to evaluate a program is to be engaged throughout the entire process, build up the competencies in the local community. So
I love that.
that's kind of been a philosophy that I take about training. So back to traditional training. Traditional training usually is you go into a room and everybody's sitting there and there's some lecture, maybe a few activities, but then people leave and they may not have transfer of training. And it might be evaluated using Kirkpatrick's, like, let's get a reaction. Did you like the food? Was the room temperature okay? There may be some learning questions, but you're not getting at any transfer of training or action. And so it's really important to have components. And so I started doing this competency based work. And so
Yes.
really looking at what are the competencies you need. And so the training is built on those competencies and making sure they leave with those skills. So it's a lot of practice and kind of a situation where you're working a lot in teams, you're conveying your ideas and communicating. So it's more of a facilitator than a presentation.
Yeah, gosh, I love that. I know we were talking a little bit before we jumped on. That is so true for my career path. And that's what made I was so interested in what you do is it's hard. I've been to so many. I couldn't even give you a number. Training events, leadership events, whether it was in person or online. So true. I've gotten many of those. Can you give us your feedback? How was the temperature? How was that just hits home? And I'm thinking, why does that matter? I don't really know.
Yeah.
I remember you might have one or two things that you absorbed from being there, being in the room. And that's great. And it's helpful. But to invest all that time and to walk away, not really understanding how to take that
Right.
all that knowledge you learned and implement it back at your office or back in your team or whatever it is, right? That's so important. So I love this. Are there specific things? Because I'm like you, I'm a hands-on learner. I know some people, and I used to think I was not. I used to think I just give it to me. I'll read it, I'll study it, and I'm good. But that is not true. And I feel like that's not true I don't know the data on this, but I feel like that is not true almost across the board. Like if you're doing it hands on, and I noticed a lot of places are starting to give you the materials to read, the applications, and then also
Perfect.
the hands-on, right? So now you have everything. How do you guys, the tech company, how do they do that? How do they ensure people are leaving using all of those methods, but being able to bring it back to their team or their company and implement and remember and retain it?
No, that's a great question. You know, one of the things we do is we kind of focus on training the trainers. And so people come to us, like we've worked in oil and gas, we've worked with first responders, you know, we've worked in higher ed and public schools. And in every case, you know, you might not be able to afford to have everybody be trained. Now, one time in the military, we kind of put the cost in there for the training as a cost, and they said, "Oh, well, we're going to put everybody in there instead of per person."
Yeah.
So we ended up training everybody, but um, it really works well when you're training the trainer is that you're making them equipped to be able to go back and train within the organization.
Yeah.
So it's a lot like what I was talking about in international development is training the people to be able to do that. So you were talking a little bit about all the different learning styles. And one of the things that, you know, some people argue, you know, are there really learning styles? Does it make a difference? And I think it does because although most people do like hands on, there are people that are more read write. You know, if they read it and they write it, you know, that's how they process. So the more modalities that you use, the better the training will be. What we do in the tech training group, a lot of times we have all the materials on a flash drive. We used to do a great big notebook, training notebook. It's so bulky. So we have all the materials on a flash drive. And then all the materials that the individuals develop while they're in the training program. So, like project management is one of the topics we do. They will actually go through all the stages doing the Gantt chart and creating the project. That's their own project. They bring it with them to the program. And so that way, when they go back, they have what they need for their industry. And so we try to make it really authentic and something that they can use right away, just in time learning.
So good. And I think, yeah, the sooner you implement it, right, the more sustainable it becomes. I'm curious about this. Based on your research and the global experience, why do you feel, because it can't be just that, I don't think, right? Why do you feel so many training and development efforts kind of fall flat?
Well, I think it depends on the individual. And you know, you were talking earlier about adult education. There's certain principles about adults, and if a training is required, you know, for your medical license or, you know, for some reason you have to have continuous education, then it becomes more formal, right? It's like being back in the classroom. A lot of that's online, but still it's required versus someone that is doing it just because they want to learn. Or I need to retool, like I'm in the stage, I'm calling it my encore career. You know, having recently retired, I'm looking at how do I reinvent myself?
Yeah.
And so when adults have a reason to learn, then that need to know, being able to transfer it just in time, those kind of motivators allow people to be more engaged because I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this because someone's told me I have to do it. And so a lot of it really has to do with the mindset of the person doing it. It's like, I want to grow and develop. So I've been on this journey myself, and it takes a lot of self-directedness to do that. You know, I could go and play with my dog or go for a walk or something, but I have things on my calendar every day that I do. But I've been telling people it's kind of like being back in school, but I'm taking all electives. Like I'm just
I love
doing all
that.
the things I
That's
want
a
to
great
do.
way.
And there that kind of motivation, especially with adults, living longer and healthier lives. People, part of the reason I'm doing coaching now is that I'm a baby boomer, and I see baby boomers not wanting to leave their jobs.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for the generations behind us because we're like, when are you going to go? When are you going to retire? And,
She leaving.
I know my baby boomer friends out there, I'm with you. I understand.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what are you so afraid of? And I
Mm.
think it's an identity crisis. This is kind of my thought and an idea I'm
Yeah.
working on is that when you introduce yourself, I'm Kim Dooley. I'm a Regents Professor Emerita for Texas A&M University. That's my identity. But then now I said, okay, my identity isn't that anymore. My identity is author, life coach, consultant. And so I had to bring myself into a new mindset is that I have a lot of skills I bring with me. It's not starting over, but now I'm doing the things I love because I want to help people, but it's in a different context. And it's working and with the online tools, it's really being able to work with people anywhere. Um, I love the idea of adult learners and helping people in transition that lost a job, maybe going through a divorce, and others like me that go from being in this one identity. I mean, I was at Texas A&M for 35 years.
Wow.
So, you're kind of like, that's who I
Yeah.
am.
It's
But
such a
it's
great
not.
career. Yeah. That's a
Yeah. And
great
so moving
career.
on to the next chapter, that's kind of where I want to focus my coaching and my work on adult learning is helping individuals in transition to be able to have the life they love, doing the things they love, still be active, but not necessarily in that same identity, have a new identity.
Yeah. That's so good. So tell me take me into what you're doing now. Take me into the life. So from tech, learning and being a professor, what to a life coach. Take me through that transition and what
No,
felt good about
absolutely.
that.
I love to. And this is really the business part since we're talking about business. Tech Training Group has been around for 25 years. Like my husband and I did it kind of as a side business. Professors aren't on 12-month contract. And so we would pick up work doing training for corporations or doing, like I said, evaluation projects. And so we've continued to do that. But now that we're retired, I want to do it full time. And so one day I was just sitting there and thinking, what did you love the most? You have to ask yourself, what's my purpose? What do I really love? If I had a
Mhm.
perfect day, what would I be doing? And so, in kind of looking at that, I said, my favorite part of the job as a professor was mentoring graduate students and also mentoring faculty because the last part of my career was also an associate dean and I did
Yeah.
faculty development. So, helping people to meet their potential, helping people to get promoted, helping grad students to finish a dissertation, helping them to publish, helping them to find jobs. And so that's the part I loved the most was seeing them be successful. And so I thought, okay, well, I really think mentoring is a little bit like coaching. And we had an executive coaching piece to the business, but I wasn't certified. And so I'm going through, I don't know if you've heard of the Brave Thinking Institute.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm doing the Dream Builder program right now.
It's
And
amazing.
so I'm learning a lot about mindset. Like I always talk about, I have a growth mindset, but
Yeah.
I'm learning how to manifest those dreams and how to, if you have things saying, "Oh, that'll never happen, or I'm not good enough, how to overcome those obstacles in the
Yeah.
way. And it takes a daily kind of meditation about, okay, this is where I want to go. This is me in the future and this is how I'm going to get there. I'm just starting the how part. They say, don't think about the how. And so I've done the vision, and I'm really excited to start to take other people through that vision. So I really started with what's my purpose? What do I love? What would I love to be doing? And that's how I ended up getting into the coaching.
So
And
good.
then I've always wanted to write a book. I mean, you mentioned I have a lot of publications,
Yes.
but they're all technical writing. They're all research based articles. And I've written a book before, but it was a textbook for a class.
Yeah.
So I am writing a book, and it's called When Life Misses a Note.
I
I'm a
love
singer,
it. Tell us
so
more.
there's kind of play on music in there,
Yeah.
but it's actually about gaining wisdom through lived experience. And so each of those countries, I mean, I have a few chapters that happen in the US, but most of the chapters are a story, a true story of something crazy that's happened to me in all my travels around the world.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so they're funny stories, they're sad stories, they're stories about learning to just be alone and to be in the present. They're stories about resilience, the
Oh,
stories about, never giving up. And so I'm having a lot of fun with that. I'm about halfway through writing the book. And I've had to learn that style of, hey, there's a formula to writing journal articles, but this formula is a lot more fun. And since it's lived experience, I guess it's sort of like a memoir.
yeah.
But it's really about anytime anybody's in a situation where there's uncertainty or a dilemma, how do you overcome that? And so I've tried to write it more as these crazy things happened to me, but in closing the chapter, what's that leadership lesson or what's that life lesson? So it's easy to write because I'm just like, okay, today we're going to talk about Greece. And yesterday we talked about Trinidad. And so they're
Mm.
all in a context of a country. So I try to bring in the food or bring in, a little bit of historical context.
Yeah.
I try to describe the environments
Yeah.
so people can vicariously go on that trip with me.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned earlier on about the culture and how important that is for people to be able to absorb what it is that you're sharing. So I think, and to just for people who haven't traveled a lot, to be able to, kind of find themselves through your words in that place so that they can live that experience with you as well. So good. Tell me the name of the book again.
Book is called When Life Misses a Note. I hopefully will be out in the spring sometimes.
Oh,
Time.
I
I
love
don't know
that.
the exact date.
Well, I definitely want to write it down. I want our listeners to hear it and be prepared for it because I can't wait to read it. I think it sounds amazing. You've worked, and I love the life coaching. I love that you're doing that. That is all so, like we talked about, we have a lot of similarities. What do you see with the tech company and plugging that all in? Is it all for that purpose, or will you be? Tell me more. Tell me what you'll be doing with that.
No, good.
Yeah, tell me more. Give me details.
What I'm hoping, it seems like I've got all these electives and all these journeys going on at the same
Electives, I love it.
time.
Yeah.
But my thought is that, everything is building our clientele for the tech training group. And so even like I'm preparing to do a TED Talk, fingers crossed, sometime in 2026. And so would love to do more speaking engagements. I'd love to get coaching clients. I'd like to be
Amazing.
able, what I hope to do is develop like a lot of the training materials that we've normally done. I'd like to develop them all in online formats where people can customize and do different modules to get a certificate. And so I'm doing a lot of work that may seem like it's in isolation, but the idea is that the book would draw people in as clients to the company. So the book was something I just always wanted to do. I don't expect that I'll become like you and a bestseller, but you never know. You have to try.
You have to
So,
try.
so I've already started thinking about a second book. So maybe this might be part of the journey because
Love
I
it.
love writing and I love storytelling. And most of these stories have been told by me to others, if they're having a bad time. And I said, did I ever tell you the time that, I fell on a glass bottle and had to have emergency surgery in Lima, Peru? So I've told these stories, but now to get them, you know, actually written down and in a format that they can be shared with others.
Yeah. Kim, your clientele, has that changed? You just mentioned that. Has that changed from previous to now retirement for the tech company? Who's your ideal clientele? Who's this going to help?
Well, traditionally, we've worked more with, well, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to back up and say we've always had a place in higher education because both my husband and I, as professors, we have colleagues all over, the US and the world, and have friends there in North Carolina and Raleigh,
Oh, come visit,
NC
come
State.
visit.
So, so we've always kind of worked in that space. What is new and what is building is that we want to be able to work in broader spaces. So,
Yeah.
for example, we're working right now with a new company we've never worked with before that we might become partners with. And they work in finding groups that need training. I can't disclose because I have a non-disclose
That's
agreement with
okay.
them,
Yeah.
but they work in communities. And so it was more executive training. And
Okay.
we're hoping in the spring we'll be going to Egypt to do that training.
Wow.
So we love that idea, because travel is such a part. Of course, Egypt is on my bucket list. So we
Hmm.
want to do that through the tech training group, but I also want to get coaching clients and groups. So it's a combination of things that'll all run through the tech group. And that's why forums like this, Lisa, are so important because, your network can now become part of my network and you're
Yeah.
introducing me to people that might find that what we do it would be helpful to them. And so that's kind of this phase right now, of really trying to get out there beyond the people that already know us and find people that don't know us.
That's
And
exactly
so
right. Yeah.
it's
And
really
this will do
important.
that for sure. This will put this in front of the audience that is ideal for you, you know? So for leaders listening, because they are listening, who want to create real growth in their teams, where should they start? What would you recommend?
Well, one
Volume?
thing one thing I've recently learned um, is that you really need a social media presence. And I've
Okay.
tried to do some of that. But I've just hired someone as an apprentice that's a student. She's in her last year of college that's going to be taking over our social media for us and helping us do some updates in our webpage. And I think that that is so important
Hmm.
because, word of mouth only gets you so far. So, being able to thoughtfully post and draw people in that would be interested
Hmm.
in training programs or interested in coaching. And so I think the best place to start is making sure you have some social media presence. And, obviously you have to have the content, you have to have the motivation, you have to have the passion, but you really need someone to make you look good on social media. And so that's where we're going right now. I've got her for 3 months.
Nice.
And hopefully, we start to see return on investment. I'll hire someone full time to do that because we're a small company. And right now, we hire people as we need tasks. So I have an electrical engineering team that helps me with AI. I have a lot of content experts that I know around the world, and so being able to build that virtual team that, we need
Yeah.
this. Oh, the best person is this. So we're not trying to do it all ourselves. And so that's kind of where I would recommend people start.
Okay, I love that. And I took your advice, and that's exactly what I did here with Project Icon. They are just phenomenal at what they do. Now, what's the difference? Speaking of transformation, what do you think the difference is between, and I want to pick your brain on so many things. What do you think the difference is between training for compliance versus training for transformation?
That's a wonderful question. And for any adult educators out there, I have to say, I think about Mesereau. And Mesereau talked about how, as adults, a lot of times we're in our comfort zone and we're afraid to learn new things. We might look like we're not so smart, or we might, so
Yeah.
you would think adults would be confident in learning, but a lot of times it's not as, they don't feel safe in that space. And so Mesmer talks about how this need for new knowledge often is a result of a disorienting dilemma. So I'd mentioned earlier, like I want to work with people in transition. So
Yeah.
what I really want to do is if somebody's going through some sort of, and I hate to use the word crisis, but if somebody's going through something where they're really discontent or
Yeah.
they've lost something in their life, then that's a disorienting dilemma. And that's when there's certain like steps you take of kind of going back and, looking at where you were and thinking about where you want to be and what new skills do I need. And then you start to build these new skills so you can get where you want to go. Well,
Mhm.
that type of learning is a transformative experience
Yeah.
because that means something's changing. And so if you stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to change. And if you have a growth mindset, you should always be learning something new every day.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy. And so if
I
you
love it.
do read my book, I talk about things like eating guinea pig in South America. I
Okay.
mean, you have to. You have
Yeah.
to try new things. I mean,
When in
I'm
Rome,
be there again.
right?
So I have a little funny story about eating guinea pig on a stick. But,
Let me hear it. I want to hear it.
well, when I ordered that, I've also eaten other bizarre things because I always try new things. But I don't know what I expected, but the way it's prepared, it's often, they roast it on a stick and it's the whole guinea pig. So for y'all that have a pet guinea pig, you might want to not listen to this, but
Yeah.
so it's the whole guinea pig. And so when they bring it, they have all these nice vegetables and things, and the whole guinea pig is sitting on top of the plate of those vegetables. And I had no clue how to start. And so I was with a colleague and he asked if they could cut it for me, like you eat chicken pieces, right?
Yeah.
And so they took a machete and they chopped it in pieces and then put the head on top and brought it back to me. And it still had its little eyes and
Oh man.
its little nails and
Mm.
everything.
Oh gosh. Mm.
So I kind of go somewhere around the ribs, try to get a little piece of meat.
Yeah.
And, everybody says it'll taste like chicken, right? But it didn't taste like chicken. I'm not sure what it tasted like, but, the thing you have to keep in mind is that in certain countries, we think, oh, the protein sources we might eat, depending on if you're
Yeah.
vegetarian or if you eat meat, we wouldn't think about that. But in a country that has, you know, great mountains and you might not have all the same kind of areas for production of meat, that's really common.
Yeah.
And so even in projects like Heifer Project International, it's not always a heifer or a cow that's given. A lot
Yeah.
of time it is, you know, chickens or it
Yeah.
might be lamb or it might be guinea pig
Yeah.
because that's the protein source that is culturally appropriate for that environment.
For that environment, for that
So
culture. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that
so
makes, we
so
have
I feel
to,
like I gotta understand the culture.
yes.
Part of that's the music, part of that's the food, part of that's just, being with the people, how they
Yeah.
dress. I
Immersing
love it all. I
yourself in
love to
it.
go to churches around the world. I love it. So yes, one story in my book is about eating guinea pig and other things.
Interesting. And I'm sure there's so many, you've had so much experience in multiple different cultures that I think, I'm excited to hear all about it. Looking ahead, what skills would you say, Kim, or mindset will matter if you're talking to a group of leaders, especially in today's climate? What skills or mindset will matter most for leaders and organizations, say, over the next decade? What do you think?
I would probably say emotional intelligence. I
Mm,
think that we've
yeah.
worked in so many settings where, like in leadership, we talk about the great man theory. And even as women, in the book Lean In, I mean, you're talking about as more women are moving into these leadership roles, the
Mhm.
styles of leadership are changing. And the way that people are interacting, there's maybe more communication, more feedback. And so a lot of it is if people don't know how to work with others and to build others up as part of your team, then you're not going to retain your good employees. And I've worked in situations where I've had leaders, bosses that had no emotional intelligence. And maybe I'm off here, but I tell you, one of the things about me as a leader and with my teams is we have equality. I mean, it's like we are a team.
Yeah.
I will do whatever I need to do. There's nothing that's below me. I take out the trash and clean up, wipe down the tables after the event because I I I value them and I don't want them to feel like, "Oh, I'm the leader and you get to do all that stuff and I get to take the credit." I would never do that. And
Yeah.
so I really love this idea of emotional intelligence because I went through a very high executive leadership program. And one of the things we did was EQ. And I had never really heard of it at that time. So all these people are leaders in higher ed, and we had to line up by our EQ. And I was way over on the right side in a corner by myself because, I'm so outgoing and I'm so team. "Oh, y'all want to go to dinner tonight?" Kind of person. And these are all these researchers, lined up over here. And I thought, man, I'm weird. I'm an outlier. But then I realized, and you can work on emotional intelligence. So one
100%.
of the things I realized is my weakness there is that I often speak before I think. And so that's something I have to work on. I have to think, especially if I'm triggered. You know what I mean?
I
Like
do.
I'm pretty
Yes.
even keel and I don't get mad very often, but every once in a while I get triggered and I have to really start counting and breathing because my first reaction, and I'm a Scorpio, so my first reaction is that little tail wants to come and go and
Yeah.
sting you. So
Yeah.
I have to work on that and think about it and put myself in a situation that I don't know what that person's going through. I don't know why they're being so cruel or mean or, condescending or whatever it might be. And that I have control over what I say. And if I let them upset me,
Hmm.
then I'm just playing into their bad behavior. So that's something I've had to learn, and it's hard. It's
Yeah.
very hard sometimes because I want to take up for people, especially if somebody's saying something about someone I work with. Like the gossip thing, I
For
don't like
sure.
that. If you've got
Yeah.
something to say, come and talk to me in person. Or don't tell me because I'm that boss. Like, you should fire this person. Like, I started in a job and people started coming in and saying, you should fire this person. I was like, was there any evidence that this person has not been performing well? What kind of,
100%.
yearly evaluation scores do they have?
Yeah.
I'm not going to just fire a person without data. So it's just
Yeah.
interesting how people try to play.
Yeah. Oh, humans are interesting. That is, yes, I hear you on that. And I love that you said emotional EQ because, well, I think one of my favorite reads is by Travis Bradberry, The Emotional EQ 2.0. Like that
Mm-hmm.
book is just
Great.
insightful. And I think it's a great read. Same thing you mentioned, Let Them. I mean, the recent,
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal book out by Mel Robbins, the Let Them Theory.
Robin.
All huge, just so important. So thank you for that insight. If our listeners and our audience could take away just one idea from today's conversation, what do you hope it is, Kim?
Well, I know earlier talking about the guinea pig, I always would tell students when I take them on a study abroad, and I think this has been my best teacher is travel is the best teacher and try something new every day. So that's two things, but they kind of go together, and when you assume your culture on other people when you're traveling, you know, you're not really getting the full experience. And so you have to do things off the tourist trail
Love
and
that.
get in there and interact with the people to really understand a place.
I love that so much, Kim. I remember, and that takes me back a little bit when I was an international flight attendant. You didn't get a lot of hours there, but when I did, I didn't take them for granted. I was just passionate about like, I got to go out, figure out how these people are. And I remember this whole like stigma of like this particular country and they don't like Americans. And just exactly to what you said, it's because of the assumptions sometimes that we bring to other countries. Like we want to impose our culture on them when you're in their country. We don't love it. So why would they be open to that? I love that idea. I love that you immerse yourself into the country's culture and experience it with them instead of, around
Yeah,
them,
one of my favorite experiences was going to the Greek Orthodox Church.
Tell me,
Well,
say more.
I was on a board in Thessaloniki. There was a school there, and I ended up doing my faculty development leave there as
Yeah.
well. And I had colleagues at this institution, and so I kept telling them I don't want to do all the things tourists do. I want to live the life of a Greek while I'm here. And so one of the things I did is I went to Greek Orthodox Church. And you hear that expression, it's all Greek to me,
Yeah.
from the movies. But I didn't understand exactly what was happening. I knew some words, like Yesu and Maria, there were words like that I knew that were the same in Latin or, other countries. And so she just said the women were on one side and the men were on another. And the thing that was so fascinating is that they had like a Byzantine choir. Like the
Yeah.
music doesn't look like regular music, and there's like these notations and things. And so they were singing these chants. It was so
Mm.
beautiful. And so she just said, "Just watch me and whatever I do." And I said, "Okay." So I'm sitting there, and she would do the sign of the cross, and then I would do the sign of the cross.
Mhm.
And so then one time she just comes up and like does her nose, and I'm like doing the sign of the cross. I'm like, "Oh no, I messed up." But and so when we were leaving, they were doing communion, and I mean, it was different in the sense that we were going up for communion and then walking out a back door. And so I had the bread and I dipped it in the wine, and I'm walking out, and it was a big hunk of bread.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, and I was going over to the trash can because I'd taken what I saw with communion, and she goes, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's sacred. That's
Oh,
the body of Christ. You can't do that." And so I kept eating the bread.
sorry. Yeah.
But it was I loved it because it was very spiritual, even though I didn't understand Greek. The experience of being there, it was just, I don't know, I just love to go, as I said, to churches in different countries, and they're just so beautiful. Some are really ornate and some are just really simple, but I love the art and I
Yeah.
love just the presence of being in these churches around the world. So it was really fun. I had a
So
great
cool.
time.
I can only imagine what beautiful experiences you've had, Kim. Thank you so much for, gosh,
Welcome.
bringing such clarity, depth, and humanity to a conversation that affects really every single one of us, right? If we think about it, and whether
Yeah.
we're leading teams or we're pivoting or we're just trying to grow ourselves, all those things matter, and you're just a light within that, and it's so, if
Thank
someone,
you.
you're welcome, if someone wants to get a hold of you or interested in training, how can they do that?
Well, the best way would be probably to email me at my email, and I'll give it to you orally. I don't know if it's
Okay.
easier. Do you want me to put in a
Yeah,
chat
no, go
or?
ahead and tell us and we'll put it
Okay.
into the show notes.
Okay, wonderful. So it's K dash Dooley at tech, which is TECH, training, all the way, training, another G group.com.
Love it.
So K-Dooley at tech, TECH, traininggroup.com.
Awesome. We'll write that down and we'll make sure it's in the show notes. And thank you so much to our Business Insider Roundtable listeners for spending this time with us and learning something new today. If this conversation, if it sparks something in you, I encourage you to reflect on how learning shows up in your own life and leadership and how you might create space for growth that actually lasts. Until our next episode, thanks for joining us. Thank you, Kim, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.